Adaptations.
And hello, thank you for listening to Abstract Transmissions. Today we have Robin Furth. She is the author of the Complete Concordance of the Dark Tower, as well as the author to the Dark Tower comics adaptation of the Stephen King series, as well as research extraordinaire when it comes to the Dark Tower and the inner workings of Sai King himself. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Very glad to be here.
I have so much to talk about. We were talking a little bit before we started about kind of the literary publishing industry and kind of how many different facets and stuff there are to it. So it's very interesting when you get to talking to somebody from that perspective that kind of sees how all of it works and the variances of fiction. So you were explaining there's a lot of different type of fiction initially.
Yes, because you were talking about a friend of yours who writes short fiction. So we're talking about different markets for short fiction. I'm sure there are a lot of listeners out there who are writers as well and maybe trying to break in. And there are a lot of magazines that do publish short fiction, especially all different ranges. Some of them are flash fiction, so they're really, really short fiction. Some for just a few pages, and then some go up to even publishing novellas. So it's really important if you want to get your work out, just do a little research and look into, do you write horror? Do you write fantasy? Do you write mystery? Do you write literary fiction? Do you write experimental fiction? And there are different audiences for all of those kinds of work. So that's a great thing. It's really varied.
So I have a question to kind of follow up with that. I didn't realize that. So that those initially you're talking about is the different length variations. And then you also have genre as well.
Exactly.
So with that, the length variations, when you get to genre, we're obviously going to talk heavily about the Dark Tower today.
Yes.
What would you consider the Dark Tower to be in its entirety? Obviously, it's made up of multiple novels and novellas and short stories. But one, what would you, and I don't obviously expect you to speak for Sai King here, but what would you classify if you were to be asked your personal opinion, what type of genre?
Yes, that actually is a really good question, because I've had this conversation with quite a few people.
Tough one for me, and I'm like, what is it?
Because you have that Western, and you have fantasy elements, and you have science fiction elements, and you have a kind of dystopian future as well. So there are many different facets to the Dark Tower series. And at one point, Eddie Dean's talking about different kinds of books with Stephen King. Sorry, not with Stephen King, with Roland. I'm getting my people confused. And Roland is confused about why there are so many separations. He says, "Does no one eat stew?
Right.
No one mix them all together." That's perfect.
It is. That's great. It's funny. I haven't thought about that part in a long time, actually. And you said that, and it's just like, this really kind of highlights what I've said before to people that also Steve said about audiobooks. You miss so much, and you could reread it 3 times and still miss some stuff. And the audiobooks do such a good job filling in some of that, which this is another thing that, like, I caught it, right, but I didn't catch it until like the second time around or the third time around. And you don't always think of it a lot until you bring that up.
Well, isn't that the case? I find when I go back to the Dark Tower series, I'm always finding new things.
Yes,
I've read it 5 times. Because it's so huge. There's so much to think about, and it's very rich. So I still find that, and I've lost track of how many times I've read it, and I've indexed it. So when you index a book, you have to go through and, you're reading a section, every time the character comes up, every time a place is mentioned, certain topics, how often they come up. So it really is, it's like dissecting it and taking a microscope and all those things. And I still come back to things that I find that are new. Not new, but I think, I haven't thought about that before. Or I see that in a new light now.
Oh my gosh, I got so many things to throw at you then.
Yeah, and it's very rich that way. Yeah, no, it's great. And that's why it's so nice to talk about. I'm just looking at You can see my bookshelf there with the comics. And unfortunately, you can't see my Dark Tower bookshelves. Actually, you can see some things, but there's a lot of, fantasy, science fiction.
I would
But
love to
over
see your
here,
bookshelf
which you can't
sometime,
see,
honestly.
yeah, Dark Tower bookshelves are over here. But I've got some great posters and things, and they're over there. You can't see them.
You'll have to send a shelfie sometime.
Yes. Oh, I know. Actually, I've
I
seen
got
it.
one in my because I just started collecting Stephen
Oh,
King. Actually,
wonderful.
I've been listening and reading for years, but I've never really collected other than the Dark Tower paperbacks that I had, the Plume ones from when I was, 12 or 13.
Isn't that fun though
Well
to still
read.
have those books,
Hmm.
because they're so full of history and memory.
It's what got me into reading, actually.
How great is that?
The
That's
the
wonderful.
Gunslinger specifically, which I find so funny because, well, not that didn't get me in directly, but it was a combination of the Gunslinger and Robert Heinlein, was what just lunged me into sci-fi and lunged me
Wonderful.
into a lot of stuff. I caught the Gunslinger before I had the book. I got it in one of the sci-fi magazines there or something.
Oh,
I don't remember what it
wonderful.
was published in, but it was some sort of obscure magazine I got at a yard sale or whatever. Read it there.
Do you have the Dark Tower, the original story?
The Gunslinger one
Yeah, the original one.
in the magazine, inside the
Yeah.
magazine. I might actually, yeah, I might. It's beat up, it's torn to shit, but
You know what though? That is going to be so valuable.
wow, really?
Really, if you have I think it was Magazine of Science, Fantasy and Science
That's
Fiction.
it. Yes. Are you
Oh
serious?
my God, you have that.
I have a
I'm
bunch of
so
those actually
impressed.
from all the years of them.
I
Yeah.
just, did you see my mouth drop?
Yeah, I
Take
got them
very
at a
good
yard
care of
sale when I was
that.
like 12 and just kind of sat on them.
You know what?
I got to find that now.
You look up how much that is worth now.
That would blow my mind because I found I came across, what was it?
I can't Google while I'm doing it, otherwise I do it for you.
I had
Boy,
a Shining first edition copy that's just beat to garbage. Got left in the rain.
oh no.
Yeah, that's like what, a $20,000 book, some crazy amount. I don't know. That's obviously not it,
Wow.
but it's just ridiculously expensive. And it's out in the rain.
Oh,
I had no idea. I mean, I sat on it for a long time, just kind of had it. I had no idea that it was worth anything, but and I'm like started collecting. I'm like, oh my God, is that? And I'm like,
yeah,
oh my
look them
God. I'm
up.
like, is it worth anything? No, not in that
Oh,
condition.
the magazine though, I think
20 bucks.
must be very rare.
That's cool. So I'm gonna look and see if I
I
can
don't
find
know
that.
because I love books and I collect them, but I don't collect, that way collect. I
Yeah.
I hoard.
I didn't think
Hoard
that
books.
magazines necessarily would have as much value as but if it was first publishing of that,
That's what I think. It was the first publishing of that story. You should
that
look it
I
up.
didn't
I don't
put
know.
those things
No
together in my
idea.
head, and wow, yeah, I'm gonna have to look for it like crazy now
Yeah,
because I have a
definitely
bunch of
look
them
that up.
and they're scattered between a couple of boxes. That's why I'm worried. It's like, did I lose it over the years or something
I'm
like
sure
that?
you didn't, because actually, I had some things like that very dear to my heart, and I thought, oh no, but I packed them away carefully, and you find them, but it's just finding them, going through your
I saw the
boxes.
look on your face, and I'm like, wait, maybe it wasn't that. I could swear a science fiction thing, but I'm like, maybe it was a different thing. But when you said that look on your face, and
Magazine
I'm
of
like,
Fantasy
maybe I
and
was wrong. And then you
Science
said the
Fiction.
science fiction mag. I'm like, that's the one.
I was really proud. I was published in the magazine of Fantasy and Science Fiction when I first started to send out my own fiction. That was the first place that took. It was a novelette that I wrote, and I was so proud because it was the same place that Roland had first appeared.
That's
I
so
thought, isn't
awesome.
that
I'm
weird?
solely like fanboying out. I said I wasn't going to do it.
That's all right.
Together. No, this is so
But
cool
get
though,
to talk about
because
things we love.
yeah, this is just like it brings up, and this is where the nostalgia thing kicks in because it's totally my childhood reading those books, even like reading it was the first
Yeah.
big novel I ever read in my life.
And it
That
is a big novel.
it is. It was a little overwhelming. Like I also read Pet Cemetery when I was younger,
I
but
love
obviously it's not the same same number of pages. But yeah, I definitely got kind of lunged into reading from that. I mean, those little sci-fi magazines were a big part of that, because that's how I kind of came across Heinlein and all that. I just had them, their magazines. The covers looked cool. I was,
Yeah,
I
they
was
are
12,
great.
13 years old. I just liked the covers and the pictures and stuff at first. And then I got into the reading of it, and I was transported to my own little experiences, these own little worlds, there are other worlds than these.
There are definitely other worlds than these.
And yeah, I
Sometimes
mean,
I wonder if we ended up in one recently.
yeah, I
What's
seriously,
happening?
holy crap. Yeah. Right.
So,
COVID-19.
I know.
Like, what are
Just
the
so weird.
chances? I'm like, I
Just
hope
so
that, I
weird.
wonder if he's going to tie that in some way. And I'm not going to ask you anything. I'm looking away, so I don't see any reactions or anything. But I kind of have been thinking, I'm like, that'd be such an interesting tie-in because of the whole 19 thing.
Yes.
And I mean, so other things like this whole experience with Trump, it's just been bizarre and fucking
Oh,
jarring to the
nightmare. Just terrifying
extremes.
nightmare. I
I
just
mean,
hope it's
I
all on
won't.
the other side.
Yeah, like, I don't want to get too heavy into politics, but they are sometimes
Yes,
a parallel theme in some of the books. And
definitely. With Dark Tower, I've been thinking about that a lot recently. I've been thinking about, John Farson, the good man,
yeah,
and the way that
holy
he
shit, he
so
parallels Trump like a motherfucker.
yes,
Holy shit, the wow,
yes. And also,
Watkins.
have you read yes, and the Wind Through the Keyhole.
Oh
Have
yeah,
you read that recently? Have you gone
I did,
back to
because I ran through it. Like, I'm actually still in it right now. I'm on the end of Wolves right now. So yeah,
oh,
recently, very
great. So
recently.
they're really fresh in your mind.
Uh-huh.
Because one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot with the way that uh, the whole rebellion against the gunslingers is depicted in Wind Through the Keyhole, and you have Walter O'Dim, who's the big bad guy.
Right. Sorry,
How
folks, about spoilers, but if you haven't
oh
read it by now, no, 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 no,
no,
no,
you're right. We
no,
can put
no.
it on the. You can put it.
I will, but in my opinion, this should be kind of expected. I'm harsh on my listeners. You guys should either read it or don't listen to this yet.
Yes,
I mean, my opinion, this is something that's so, like, very heavy about these novels that, people are going to expect to kind of hear this.
yes.
So
You're
lots of spoilers. If you haven't read to the end, you might not want to listen to all this, but
yes, exactly. Wait,
this
wait.
has
Come
to be
back to us later.
addressed.
But I've
Mhm.
been thinking about that because the basically the Randall Flagg, Walter O'Dim
Yeah,
character, he has many manifestations within that book, but what he's always doing is he's sowing falsehoods, and he's sowing distrust, and he
Discord.
yeah, and
Yeah,
you see how in Midworld it tore Midworld apart.
right.
And I think about what's happening right now in the United States, and that's one of the reasons I find it so scary because of what it is. But
That
you also
parallels.
think about kind of literary histories and what happens in books, and you think, well, it's something that could very well happen, and we're
Yeah,
seeing it happen, and
right.
that's really
Look
frightening.
how dangerously close to things have become. Like, I've never thought I'd be in it. I've always kind of straddled third party lines, right? Not this election, obviously, for a very apparent terms. Last election, I feel guilty because I feel like I'm one of the people that helped put him into place. At the same time, I couldn't stomach voting Hillary Clinton. Not for everything. There's some things I was okay with. There's a lot of things I'm not okay with, just historical, mainly just, some of the crime stuff, that I think is just, it's sad and unfortunate, but nowhere com- nowhere close to the Trump issues. Anyway, I voted for Gary Johnson. Now I kind of regret that, because we got 4 years of Trump, and it has done un hopefully not unfixable damage. Like, I
Yeah,
hope that
no,
it's
I know
not
what you mean.
irrevocable, like that there is a, I don't even know if that's the right word, but that it's fixable, that we can get out of this, and
Yes,
that we've gotten real close. And that's why I voted for Biden this election. I was very much stuck down the middle with those decisions between that and Joe Jorgensen. But it was kind of like, I can't vote for something I know is going to happen. Like, I need to vote to get us at least out of the right You know,
Yes.
that's just
And with
way.
COVID,
Oh,
it,
yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm disabled, right? I live on a government program, but I also see the inaccuracies and the gross bureaucracy and garbage that makes it so hard for people to stay getting help. So I'm not an advocate for a lot of those programs because they screw a lot of people, but we need some sort of a support. But
yes.
what's happening right now has been just complete division. Yeah. Just discordia to the 10th degree.
Yes, that's
Like,
actually
holy
a
crap.
great phrase to use right now. So fingers
I've
crossed.
used it a lot, just for the
Yes.
record. Oh man, that's what pops in my head every time. Actually, it's so funny, and we're talking about this. I feel kind of lucky, overly lucky to get to talk about this with you. But yeah, definitely, for sure. Oh, Discordia.
Yes. The world, oh Discordia, the world grows darker. Yes.
Oh, I've
But
and
let's
it,
hope that
yeah,
we're moving into
yes, yeah, the
better
positive.
times.
Well, we'll say that the neutral aspects of the Dark Tower. Let's discuss that. It's not positive, but it's positive for me because I love it and I want to talk
Yeah,
about
well,
it.
exactly. And hopefully, there always is the division between Roland's world and our world because they're not the
Mhm.
same world.
Right.
There are parallel things, but they're not the same world, thank goodness, because you think
Yeah.
about the,
They're close though.
well,
They're right
mutants.
next to each other.
Yes, the world next door.
Mhm.
So, are there any particular things you'd like to talk about with
Oh
Dark?
my goodness. I probably should have written a list down. I always make it like a highlight to not bullet point things, but here's one of the times I probably should have organized
Oh,
myself a
that's
little
okay.
bit.
It's so hard.
Langoliers. That's always been something that I've always had a connection to when I read it. I'm like, that's of course. I mean, they're eating through reality. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
that happens so much. It's really interesting you say that because I've been thinking about different Dark Tower books where that happens, like The Mist,
Yeah.
with the,
Every little thing you can find some sort of connection
which
after
is
reading it so much.
fascinating. And which actually, because we were talking about it and because I didn't want to forget, and another spoiler for people who haven't read it, The Institute, we were going to talk
Yes.
about that. Since
Yes.
we started on that before you started the
Yes.
film rolling, I thought we should come back to it. It's not
Absolutely.
fair to the other people who've joined us late.
Yes. Yes.
So, yes, definitely, definitely tied very strongly to the Dark Tower mythos with the children and the break. You think about the breakers.
Exactly. So that's what I thought they were going to be when I got that. I'd never thought that there was going to be, remote viewing, killing kind of thing, which for those, sorry, another spoiler. But in the book, if you haven't read it and you're still listening, regardless of the spoilers, basically there's a circumstance in which the kids, instead of breaking the beams of the tower, which is again not going to be something you're going to know about until you read the book, but they're trying to assassinate. Right? Am I correct? That's how.
Vicky Earnshaw. Have you read Everything's Eventual?
Yes. Oh my gosh, how did I not make that connection?
No,
Oh.
it's just as you start, when you have those quiet moments. As I was reading, I thought, wow, this is just like Dinky Earnshaw, who ends up, as we know, in
A breaker.
Devertoid, however you want to say it. There are lots of
Divartoid?
different pronunciations, but
Yeah.
basically those assassination projects. It's really interesting how that comes up. So I kept thinking about Dinky and
Whoa.
how those children are being used on our level of the tower, because the story, of course, even if it's not our
It's
world,
not
it's a very
Keystone, but
close. Yeah,
right.
if it's not Keystone, it's quite close. So I found that really interesting, and the way, it really horrible way. I'm just looking at the book because I can't keep my fingers off of books when I start to talk about them.
I totally can relate.
Yeah, definitely. And I just thought,
Makes it tough being a collector.
oh,
You
I
gotta try
can
to
imagine.
not touch them too much.
Well, that's the thing, because here, this copy of the Institute, which I got when it first came out from Hodder, and it's a limited edition proof run, but of course, it's got my notes all over it.
Right, right. Oh my goodness.
So, that's the thing. It's like I might have
Hey,
books
if you
that,
ever want to sell it,
yeah, well, that's the thing. You'll see my little scribbly
I'm
handwriting.
okay with that. That's a value to me. You have no idea,
That'll
and then
be
you signed it.
fun.
That would be
It's
great.
so funny. But okay.
I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there. I just popped in my head about the Institute again. Before I forget, walk-ins.
Yes,
The connection there too.
which also comes up if you think about it with the walk-ins in the Dark Tower.
Yeah.
You know, when we have them coming through the light.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah, beautiful.
Gee golly, walk-ins. Every time I think that in my head, I think, I think of like the walk-ins, and you're gonna know better than I do. How is this in my thing? You've got walk-ins, right, that come into our world through these
Yes.
holes in existence. They come into our world, and they're from different realities, different facets of existence, ones that we don't understand, even sometimes possibly from Toadash space, right?
Yes, yes, and some of them are uh, very ill. They're almost like they've been poisoned. Some of them are mutants.
Yep. Okay, so they're impacted by whatever kind
Yes.
of radiation, whatever's coming off
Yes,
of, I think,
exactly. Yeah.
creatures
So
that are close to the tower, I'm
yeah.
assuming. So I mean, is that the case? Is it like the beams or the tower or anything like that generate any type of thing that, I mean, we can't, like, human beings can't get close to without?
That's actually a really good question. I think what those walk-ins, that's one of those things. I think of them as some of them come from ruined lands, so they
Yeah.
come from parallel worlds where, if you think about Roland's world having
Mhm.
had destruction, and when the beam snaps at the beginning of it's Song of Susanna, not it's the end of Wolves of the Kala. We get into Song of Susanna, and one of the beams has snapped,
Yes.
and Roland says it wasn't our world that
Yeah.
where the actual snapping took place, because
Yeah.
if it was, there would be complete and utter destruction and nothing left. So you think that some of those walk-ins might come from places where there has been the actual kind of explosion happen.
Right. That they're just
So yeah,
refugees
they're
from that.
exactly. So I always have that haunting in my mind of when Eddie and Roland see the walk-ins when they go to Turtleback Lane, and they see the walk-ins, and some of them are the children of Roderick. They look at the children of
Yes.
Roderick, which are those really, really
I was
disfigured.
gonna ask you that.
Yeah, the rods, who are very wonderful, I think, because even though they're slow mutants, as they say, they gave their grace to Arthur Eld in the
Hmm.
long ago. So you
Right.
think about that. And so,
They're not bad. They're just,
no,
you
exactly.
know,
They're
they're,
they're tragic in a way
yeah.
because of what they've experienced. And I think that, oh, sorry, I had.
No, I just have a question that popped in my head and I'll forget. What was the disdain from? I mean, obviously, you can't speak from, the perspective of Roland, but or Sai in this case. The why? What's such disdain for the children of Roderick from Roland? He kind of. I don't know. I felt like he was very incredibly. He's a harsh person as it is,
Very
right?
harsh,
He's
very
he's
harsh.
he's unrelenting, unwilling. There's very little empathy left in him
Yes.
at the
And
beginning
that
of his.
changes. What's really
Yeah.
interesting, you should say that. And we're getting off on a tangent, and I
Oh, I
apologize.
know. No. I'll do it. That's why it's called abstract transmissions.
Yes. But it's interesting because if you look at the beginning, who Roland is in The Gunslinger, and you follow his journey into the final novels of this series, he really transforms,
It
because
almost humanizes him, the experience.
he grows and he changes. It's almost like part of his journey is this change. And I don't want to give spoilers too many about
Mhm.
the ending, but we've already warned them, so we can say
Yeah.
it.
No, you're good. You're good.
So
Spoiler, it's
we
out.
must go back again and redo and change and make other decisions. But you think about even his relationship just with Jake. We
Yeah.
have the Roland in the beginning who lets Jake fall into the abyss,
Hmm.
and he regrets it, just like he kind of regrets what he does in Tull with the massacre, but he just moves on. In the rewrite of The Gunslinger, he's not quite so harsh. He's still pretty harsh though.
Hmm.
And then by the time he draws Jake back into Midworld in the Wastelands, he is already thinking, I can't betray him again. Will I betray him again? I can't betray him again. So you get to the
That
final.
duality almost,
Yes.
right?
And then when he, at the beginning of Wizard and Glass, he confesses how he killed his mother, he betrayed his mother, he betrayed Susan Delgado. It's almost like he's in the process of confession. I must change, I must change. And then in the end of the book, when he's determined to die instead of Jake, but his
That's
hit
his
came out.
salvation almost.
Yeah, and Jake dies anyway. He dies to save Stephen King, but Roland doesn't want that to happen. So that's a completely different man from the man we have in The Gunslinger. So it is really the journey to the towers, also a journey of Roland to save his own
It
soul.
almost like it made me literally like water up, like, because that's such an impactful part of the book. Like you grow
Yes,
such attachment to them, and you grow such a strong like bond with them that you relate on a human level. Your own personal experiences, like Jake becomes like his son, right? And I have a
he does
child, and I just
call
can't.
him my son.
Yeah, I just can't even, and what you just said made so much more of an impact to that moment that just brought all those emotions right
Yes,
back, which
yes,
is part of the reason why I absolutely adore that entire series. It's
yes.
so real.
It's
That's the
very
thing. It's
moving.
so
And
like you could touch it,
yes, yes, definitely. And you think about the different characters. One of the things I love as Roland draws these people into Midworld, they're all people who, on one level or another, have been broken by experience. You know what I mean? You've got um, Roland and Eddie, and Eddie's he's using heroin
Yeah.
and smuggling other things. And then you have Susanna and all the violence that she's experienced, who's at that time, she's two different people,
Right.
she, Detta and Odetta. And then you move on and you have Jake, who's this kid who's had all sorts of difficulties,
So
with the loss from his parents. His parents really don't care too much
yeah,
about
they're not at all like
yeah.
worried about his life. They're like so tunnel vision that they can't see. I mean, obviously, his dad's a cocaine addict, TV producer or whatever, but
Right, exactly.
his whole like it's like he's in his own world entirely,
Yes.
even cut off from his wife, right? I mean, they're just not even like they're living their own existences.
Yes,
And
yes.
Jake's, Bama with who's basically his
Yeah. The housekeeper is his
housekeeper's his mom,
mother. Yes.
It's really again another facet that really makes it so humanizing, so real feeling, that connection to it. It makes me want to read it again and again and again, and that's why like I put other books on hold just to read this friggin' series again, like stuff that I have on my queue, that I'm just like, you know what, I want to read the Dark Tower again, because it's satisfying in a weird way that other novels for me aren't, or
It is very satisfying. Like you say, it's very human, and to watch those relationships develop and
yes,
not to shy away from the very painful things that people go through, like with Jake's relationship with Roland, because he has this relationship with a man who becomes a surrogate father, but he's had that terrible betrayal. And he says to Roland, "You won't let me fall again, will you?"
that's
He
so
died once.
that's a hard moment too, right?
Yeah.
I just it really does it, because it's like, and then he's like, no, I'll never again, you know what I
Yes.
mean, like that. What that feels like. Anybody who's ever loved another person knows what that feels like,
Yes.
and you can link so strongly with that character, that moment, really, rather. Um, and I think that that's kind of the thing, and that ties into, and I don't want to again go into a tangent, but kind of ties into the Ralph Roberts experience of the different levels of the tower and the whole.
Yes, which I love. I love that Insomnia.
It's so good. It's
Yeah,
so
that's a beautiful
so
book. I love
amazing.
that.
But the whole each thing I do, I rush through so I can do something else, and the days do pass. I can't remember exactly how it goes. I never can. But that we need to be in the moment right?
Yes.
Like we need to live our lives in the moment, and being in those individual moments, and even in literature, as a reader, you are more in those moments than you are sometimes in your own life.
Well, I know exactly what you mean, because I joke about it sometimes, but it is sometimes a little disturbing.
It is, yeah,
Points in Roland's life I remember better than mine.
man.
I thought, how did
Yes,
that happen? And I think it is, you just fall so deeply into these worlds. As a reader, I think anyone who's a reader, you really do experience, you live in that world that you go into. And I think
right.
people who read fantasy and science fiction, that imaginative quality is part of what we love. And it's interesting because I think that there is an idea out there that if you read fantasy and science fiction, that you're not engaged with this world. And I think, well, no, actually, fantasy and science fiction makes us reflect on this world, because
Yeah.
it offers us a mirror for what we're experiencing. And it
Mhm.
often allows us to really bring into focus what's happening here and now. So,
That's true.
like allegory or anything like that.
No, what you're just saying about Donald Trump too, and the parallels between that and Farson. Like it gives you that perspective of somebody. You can make those correlations. Somebody who's very, debonair or whatever the word is, and very, and not that Trump is that, but he has a way of being debonair to, let's just say, people that are on a different level than other people. I don't know how else to word
Well,
without
he's
being a
got
dick, but like,
a very devoted base.
yes, and they're not looking for debonair. They're looking for somebody to tell them it's going to be okay, and somebody that's going to break the rules and all that stuff. So in his own way, he is this, this guy that stands above the rest of them. They saw him on the Apprentice, The Office, the Apprentice, growing up or whatever it was, and they just think of him as this crass guy, and he's going to make the change. But it couldn't be more farther from the truth. This guy has no consistent care about anybody but himself, and the only concern is to feed their own need. I mean, that's different than Farson in the aspect. Farson's an agent of chaos, in my opinion. I
Yes,
think.
and he's
I don't
he's
know.
mad because one of the things they talk about is how crazy he is. He plays croquet with human heads. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
so you do have,
Nutball
of course, there's questions about
is
Trump.
madness.
Trump,
Yeah,
whether
that's
he's
true.
playing full deck right now.
No, that makes sense. Actually, that makes it better. Because I mean, just because he's a narcissist doesn't mean he's not also just.
Yes.
I don't even know the word.
You think about that. You think about Roland's world, and you think about the utter destruction that happened there, and
Yeah.
you think about it, and it's cyclical and it's historical as well, because you have John Farson and that destruction, which is ultimately serving the Crimson King. But if you go back further in time in Roland's world, there was the time of the Great Poisoning, which we never learned that much about, the Great Cataclysm, when the great old ones destroyed themselves, and they were people more like us, in fact more advanced than we are,
Okay.
because they had computers, and they had um, they had technology that we can't even imagine.
I'm so
And
glad
they
we went
had,
this direction.
think about the rotunda with
Yeah.
its doorways to other worlds,
Uh-huh.
literally. And you could go
Yeah.
to see the Kennedy assassination, and you can go see you can travel to different times,
Okay, so
which
we
is
got
interesting. That
two
comes up.
spider webs here. I gotta write this
Oh
down.
dear. 11 2263 on the center.
Bingo. Thank you.
Yes. And
All
I'm
right. I
just
don't have to write it down now.
my shelf.
Oh my gosh, because I was gonna write this down for this reason.
Yeah, unfortunately, the shelf you can't see because it's over there. But yeah, that also, I loved that when you had the yellow card man and the black card man, and the fact that there is a doorway between two time periods.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, I don't want to give any spoilers for this book,
Yep.
but I thought the ending was very powerful. When you
Yeah.
try to do good, when you try to change the past, what can happen?
Right. Right.
That is a question, because how many of us would like to go back and undo so many of the horrors of history?
Right. But or even their own lives, right? But what are the
Yes. Oh,
repercussions?
completely.
All the horrible things that happen in your life up to this point has made you who you are now. And if you don't like
Yes.
that person, you'd be changing absolutely everything else that's ever existed in your life. And people don't always think about that, but I think that's why to embrace who you are and the things that have happened to, you
Yes.
know,
And you think about
um,
that idea of the butterfly effect, which is something they talk about
right.
with, climate change, and they talk about it with the studies
Absolutely.
of the earth.
They
But
talk about this in Jurassic Park, actually,
yeah,
the chaos
what?
effect and all that.
Yes, and everything's so interlinked.
Yeah.
The idea of Gaia, and everything connects with everything else. The ecosystem is so tightly knit.
Right. That it's
One
just,
thing is
one little
destroyed,
thing.
then it has, that knock-on effect,
Right.
which also we see in Midworld, in Roland's world, with the utter
Yeah.
destruction.
It's
But what is
interesting.
your favorite? I can't remember what we talked about before we came on air and what we talked about since. So you said Eddie Dean is your favorite character. Who's your second favorite character?
In the Stephen King universe, or in
Well,
the
Dark
just in
Tower.
Dark Tower.
Yeah,
So
because you
Dark
get into the
Tower.
Stephen King universe, it's so
Well,
huge.
so I kind of, when I say the Dark Tower, I feel like I've found at least one little thing that ties in, at least one little thing in everything that I've read of his.
Oh yes,
It's some way, shape, or form you can find something that ties
yes.
in. And I don't mean necessarily just the blue chambray work shirt. I mean, there are things that
Yes.
actually tie
Oh,
in.
exactly. And I think that's very true, because I think they're constructed that way because it's a consistent world. You think about Derry, Maine, or Castle Rock, Maine, and you
Right.
think about how they relate back to, and sometimes even show up or are mentioned in other books. Very
11,
interrelated.
no, I 11/22/63. Before I
Yes.
forget, so the yellow card man, he's kind of guarding this doorway.
Yes. Yes. And it's almost like he's falling apart
Right.
as time
Does
goes
he
on.
know he is initially when he
Yes,
first
I
got
believe
there?
he is. I believe it. I actually have to go back and reread this book because it's been quite a few years since I've read it.
Yeah.
But yes, as far as I remember, he does know he's guarding it.
And that's probably why he's drinking. It's did that just fucking him
Oh,
up.
yes, exactly.
And he's
That,
drinking to handle it.
yeah, and the kind of
I get
decay
it.
that goes along with it, which is
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, that the pull on from entropy on him as a human life or whatever, being so
Oh,
close to
completely.
that doorway, and Toadash technically, because like
Yeah,
Toadash is the the wall in between. So for the
yeah.
folks out there that don't understand what Toadash is, Toadash, you could probably explain it better than I am.
Yes, you go right ahead. You're doing a beautiful job.
The way I've always, and I think it's explained kind of, and how I picture it is like, if I'm in one room and then the other room is the other room, but the wall in between, what's living in the walls?
Yes, which is
What's
horrible.
the dark space in between both of them,
Yes,
because you can't see in it. It's there, the
yes.
space is there, and it's dark, and there's nothing. It's void of all light, but not life somehow.
No, exactly.
Oof.
Terrifying. Like the things that wander in the darkness there.
Yeah,
Well, that
the
actually
the
reminded
mist.
me. Yes, exactly. And yeah, where they actually, the Arrowhead
They come
Project,
out.
rip reality, didn't it? So that which is between the worlds leaks out.
Yeah,
But it's interesting. We were talking a little bit about the Institute, and we have the children who are basically breakers, but rather
yeah.
than breaking the beams, they are doing these assassinations. And it made me think, though, about the Dr. Sleep with the children, who the steam, which is that psychic energy that's
Yes,
being
yes, yes,
eaten
yeah.
by
Yep.
Rosie the Hat.
It
And
Rose the Hat, yeah, and because
yeah,
in that they talk about the steam there, but what else kind of had that aura around it, almost like was it the Per Callahan thing with no, that's just the aura between, he could tell which vampires, right? Because there's like a halo around some of the vampires. It's not the
oh yes, actually, definitely. Because there's the type 1 vampires, the type 2 vampires, and the type 3 vampires. And
yeah.
yes, there's that blue aura that you can see, that some people can see around these vampires.
So I almost noticed, like in the book, there's like a difference between the type of mist that came out, if I'm correct, right? When somebody
Oh
dies.
yes,
Um,
yes.
So
Oh,
I just kind of had
when they're
that
extinct. That's
connection in
really
my head.
interesting. I will have to go back and look again at that
I
when
just
they
didn't know if there
collapse.
was a correlation there. And there was something else, something else that had almost the same thing that almost seemed a lot like that. Um, vampires would just disappear as well. What else was it that? Oh yeah, and that's the one. Per Callahan. They just leave the clothes behind, and they just
Yes,
disappear
which
or
is
whatever.
very creepy.
Same thing happens in Doctor Sleep when they
Yes,
die. So
so
I did.
strange.
Well,
Yeah, so you're right. You're right. Very excellent thing that you
huh.
drew together.
I just my brain went on some weird tangent there, but
Yeah, no, no. No, when
the
you start to think
the
about these
mist though,
things.
that
Mhm.
was what the mist, the steam that comes out.
Yeah.
That's where you were going originally before I
Yeah, I was
derailed the
just thinking
conversation.
about those connections between books with psychic children and different manifestations of that. And I do find that interesting that childhood, with I'm fairly certain I'll need to go back to the institute, but they talk about that psychic ability being in children, and a lot of people lose it as they get older, and some people
Writing
do.
down. Keep going. Sorry.
So, but yeah, the importance that those, precogs, postcogs, telekinesis, different psychic abilities, right back to carry. It's a real
Yes.
theme in Stephen King's work, which I think a lot of fans just adore. And
So the shop though, like why
yeah,
didn't I kind of thought that the shop was going to show up in the institute, and I was kind of like
I
not
wondered that
disappointed, but
too.
I'm like, why not? Because we haven't heard from them in a long time, and it almost seemed
Especially
like they
those two.
were like a remnant of it, you know?
Yes. And I think that those secret areas of government, secret societies. Stephen King's work is full of that. It's almost like the world behind the world.
Yeah,
There's the world that we all live in that we assume is
shadow
reasonable and
governments.
rational, and then something shifts, and we see behind the facade. And you can even see it with the Cantoy. You know what I mean? They with
Yeah,
their
the masks of human
yeah,
like
yeah,
living.
yeah. The
Yeah,
low
yeah.
men that have their
Man.
masks, and then the mask shifts, and you see that they're not human anymore. And
Yeah,
it's almost like that with the world. Uh, a lot of people won't see what they don't expect to see.
that's true.
Yeah.
Like, the same
So
thing that they said when the first settlers came. The Native Americans didn't see it coming because their brains couldn't wrap their head around it, and that when they
very
showed
different
up there,
culture.
that they cognitively it wasn't registering until it was too late. They were there, and it manifests itself almost as these evil, unknown aliens.
Yes,
Um,
I agree with you. It is that what we can't comprehend. It's what we can't comprehend in our own lives. When we see it, it takes us a long time to say, yes, that is real, and that is something that I'm dealing with. And I think that even with what we're experiencing right now, with what's happened in the United States with the attack on Capitol Hill, more and more things are being revealed about uh, people who were involved. It's shocking. You think, how could that be? And then you find out, yes, that's true. Um, and it becomes more and more horrifying, but we
right,
didn't expect it. We have to almost shift our vision of the world
right.
to
To
encompass this
accept it or
new
even understand it.
reality. Yeah, this is how reality has always been, but we just weren't aware. And I think that's one of the things that helps if you read fantasy and science fiction. You're always more open to the world shifting a little bit and having to encompass it, because you're not as locked into the box. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It allows you so much more flexibility
Yeah.
outside of that, and maybe even more so like cosmic horror and sci-fi. That the
Yes.
blend between those two.
Oh,
Um,
completely.
it really it touches on that. Like the Lovecraft stuff was very much like that. And I haven't read a
Yes, I
ton of
love
Lovecraft,
Lovecraft.
but the stuff that I have read,
Yes.
it's pretty awesome how well he portrays that the color out of space, for example, a color that your brain can't understand or
Yes.
recognize, a new color, as if that's even possible. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing, I think, is just unfathomable reality. And how to be able to get that somebody else to understand what you're saying, to portray that in words is so difficult. And that's why, I mean, I definitely love that facet of Steve's writing when it comes to like the Dark Tower and the connections. And
Oh,
um,
completely. Do you know the work on the subject of horror and different kinds of horror and different ways of seeing? Have you read any M.R. James, the British horror writer?
I have not, but I'm going to write that down.
You would,
Thank
I
you.
think you would really like him. He was an academic and he studied, um, I can't remember off the top of my head what his subject matter was that he actually studied, but he does a lot of the history of the occult comes into his novels. He was writing
Okay.
in the 1890s in Britain. He
Oh.
was he was a very learned man, and
Hmm.
so he's actually drawing from old texts and old beliefs and medieval horrors. And if you want disturbing, he is great. He is just wonderful.
Very cool.
And I have had some conversations with Stephen King about M.R. James, who he likes a lot. So
So
you might find him
it's
really
interesting because I'm usually not traditionally like a horror reader. I mean, there's certain things like Clive Barker, but I've never really historically been big into horror, which is interesting because obviously Steve being the master of horror, I had never really delved a lot into his work because I thought of it as so. Even though I had read The Gunslinger, and that's what really drew
yes.
me into it. Matter of fact, the first three books, and then I never could quite get past that for whatever reason it was. Not reading, getting into being, a dumb high school kid and wrapped up in his own world, whatever it may be. I didn't start reading again until I was like 19 or whatever. And then still, I was kind of limited on what I was reading, and it was a lot of like tech science stuff, like Crichton and stuff, because I really into like nanotechnology and stuff.
Yes.
Nerd. I really like that heavy background kind of stuff. A lot of people don't like Crichton because he writes so so intricately about like the thatched roof in freaking Timeline. Like the people like nobody wants to know about 5 pages of this. I liked it.
But
I like
some people do.
some
That's
people
the
do,
thing.
and I like that with Steve's writing when it comes to characters, thorough back
Yeah.
character, or even the characters that are unimportant, that are
They're
going to not last long. You're
yes.
learning about them, and I love it.
I really like that too because it makes them very full. It makes them very believable. Often you can identify with them, or even if you don't identify with them at all, you feel that you know them or you've known someone like them. And so it
Yes.
does give a very grounded feel to his universes, not just a Dark Tower universe, but when you get into his other work as well.
Wow. Yeah. I the more I think about how much that like characters, when you're saying that, my brain does the ADHD thing, goes on a tangent. I was thinking, not really a tangent, kind of ties in, but like monsters that are human beings. And this will tie into
Ooh,
the other thing that I wanted to go into, like in Rose Matter, right? Or, Bev's husband. The monsters in real life, right? And a lot of times it's these not, and this is where walk-in kind of became a new
yes,
definition to me, is it's not walk-ins coming into our world, but when they come into our world, they inhabit a person's body
yes.
instead. So 11/22
Desperation.
63 was one I was thinking of,
Yeah.
uh,
Yes.
because Lee Harvey Oswald isn't who shot Kennedy at the end of the book, is what I gather from that. Something from another world inhabited his body and took that dude out. And whether it's the past being obdurate, any of that stuff, it had to do with some other entity inhabiting that guy's body. And you could see it in his eyes at the end. And when they start to go into this, is I think like a common theme in some of the expanded work, as well as like The Shining and stuff too.
Yeah.
Um, you know, how often is that? Yeah, that invasion, like you're saying, that somebody coming into your body and controlling your body, right down to Jonesy and everything, and Dreamcatcher. Like
And
it's
desperation as well with the pack.
Kelly and Tragan. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, he takes
pack.
over people's bodies and they become big and monstrous and bloated, and then he burns them up.
Yeah, you just choose right through
Yeah,
them.
and actually, it's really interesting you should say that, because when we think about horror, like monsters in human bodies, how as human beings do we deal with that?
Yeah.
How do we deal with the mass murderers? It's like
Mm-hmm.
years ago when Stephen King and with Black House, when he
Oh,
was co-writing with
yes.
Straub, and I did some research for that. So I went to New York City and I was doing a lot of research on Albert Fish.
Oh my
It
God, that
talked
guy is
about
so
a monster.
fascinating. Yeah, that guy is
And
fucked.
yes, and you just think, how do
How?
you, yeah, how do you even wrap your head around that one? Someone who murders and eats children.
How do you get to that? Like, what
Yes,
were the,
he
yeah,
was insane. He
what
was
got you there?
insane.
So that's it.
So
Just, or is it
yeah,
evil sometimes,
well, that's it. It's funny because
like Bev's
I
husband.
think about that. What is it that makes a human being unclean?
Yeah.
What is this thing we call unclean? And I thought, well, that's pretty unclean to me. When
Yeah.
someone's cannibalizing other people,
Right.
and heavy stuff, very heavy
Well,
stuff.
and
And
I
it
mean,
happens in our world. It's not made up. It's real.
yeah. Right. Well, and I wasn't thinking, and I was thinking kind of like even down to, um, like Bev's husband, in the
Yeah.
aspect that like he was a monster, but like a domestic
Yes.
monster.
Yes.
He
Echoing her
no
father.
superpowers. Oh
Yes.
yeah, right, yeah, exactly. Echoing her. I mean, maybe there is some, supernatural connection there, but it seems to me like he's a abusive human being. He's a
Yes.
terrible human
Yes.
being. Just like I forget the guy's name in Rose Matter, the antagonist.
Yes.
Um,
Who is
he,
monstrous.
yeah, monstrous, just a horrible human being. Uh, and I mean, obviously, there's that like other version of him almost that is the beast. I think that, and I don't know if this is what he was trying to say as figuratively or whatever, is that the monster that destroyed him is like a reflection of himself in the other, that whole
Yeah, I
beast or
think
whatever. Not
yeah, I think Stephen King plays with that a lot. The monstrous in human beings, that which is supernatural versus that which is human, and the basis in human, the basest of what is human or could be human. And I think about in Dark Tower in Caliber and Sturgis, when Eddie Dean is talking to, um, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'll get you his name in a minute. And he says he's one of the Cala folks, and he says there are three boxes to a man. There's the mind, there's the heart, and then there's the basest bit that wants to do meanness for no reason.
yes, yeah.
Ian, I think, yeah.
Talking about
But
teen, yeah,
you think about that, and we have to deal with that in our own lives all the time to try and strive to be better human beings
yeah,
rather than that which is cruel, that which is violent, that which does not care about others. Like something I learned about today when I was reading the Guardian newspaper, and I was actually shocked. I think I'm not shocked that frequently, but then again, I do get become shocked. And it was about people who were supporting the fight against certifying Joe Biden, and they were billionaires who are called the anti-taxers. I didn't know, because you hear about the anti-vaxxers,
mm-hmm,
the anti-taxers who don't want any tax on their millions.
mm-hmm.
And I thought, how are you supposed to have a society without any cohesion? They have roads, they drive down the road. There's a police force, there are teachers, there are hospitals that do get some federal money. How
Right,
can you know that idea of no man, no woman is an island? We need a society where we do have some coherence, where we do care about one another, where we do care if someone else is injured or dying,
yeah,
or starving, because where's our humanity if we forget
Sure.
about those things?
Well, I mean, and I think that you're right. There's a certain amount of like responsibility to all human beings to have that need, that responsibility to others, not just to yourself. I mean, I think my biggest problem with taxes are really so much that it's like it's not voluntarism. I think that a lot of things could be solved with people volunteering their time and their efforts, and I also think that would solve the problem of billionaires too. I don't think there would be
Exactly, good
billionaires if
people.
you know
Yeah,
right,
that
right,
requires good people. That's
right,
an ideal world that you're
right.
talking about, where and I actually, in my heart, I hope we can get to a point where everyone
Right.
feels that
The
responsibility.
utopia.
That idea,
Yeah.
yeah, we're back to that
Well,
idea
and that,
of
I mean, I think that's both ends of the spectrum. Like that, the Ayn Rand libertarian utopianism is that everybody's going to help each other, and that voluntarism will solve the problems. And then the socialist Marx utopia is that that everything is going to work together if we all just live in and we're kind enough to share it, and there'll be no murder, which I think both are very optimistic views. But the problem is it's somewhere more in the middle there.
yes.
Um,
Do you know the work of Ursula Le Guin? Have you
I
ever read
don't.
it? You
I
don't.
don't,
You
but
would
I
love
need to write
Ursula.
that down next to MRG.
Ursula Le Guin.
How do I spell that?
You like fantasy as well as sci-fi. Okay,
Hmm.
let me see if I can find very quickly on my other bookshelf
Cool.
my Ursula Le Guin that you might really like.
That sounds
Um,
great.
because darn, I wish I'd pulled her out ahead of time.
How do I
Now,
spell the last name?
Le Guin, Leguin, and Wizard of Earthsea. If you've never read her, if you like fantasy, start with the Wizard of Earthsea, which I have misplaced. It's my
Say
bookshelves are
Earths of
too big.
Earthsea.
Earthsea,
Yes,
Earthsea, one
I've
word.
heard about this actually. I
Yes,
haven't read it, but
yes,
this is
you.
the
I think you
thing I
would
heard
really
about.
like it. But
Cool.
with that, I don't want to ruin anything because you haven't read it. But dealing with the kind of shadow side of the self and the shadow side of human beings does come up a lot in that book.
Right.
And this issue of what are we as human beings, she comes back to over and over again. And at the end of her life, she died a few years ago. I think she was in her 80s. She did say, I think I've come to the conclusion, the end of a long life, that there is something profoundly wrong with human beings.
Yeah.
We are capable of such wonderful things, and then we are
Well,
capable
of such
of such
harm.
horror.
Yeah.
But
I agree, but I think that the interesting thing about that too with people is that we're limited by our biology and by our makeup, and we're evolutionarily kind of like a little stuck because we have our base functionalities and whatnot, but we're evolving to another point where we're getting away from that. We can have discussions of civility and right, that's it. Yeah.
some people say the reptile brain, isn't it? Because the
Yeah,
brain
that's right.
builds on itself.
Reading a
And then
book about, well, not about that,
really
but
fascinating.
it's it's about, it's a child I don't know what the child help, parental help novel kind of.
Right, right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's called the well, the first one was the Whole Brain Child, and I don't think this is a sequel, but it's by the same author with another author, something Siegel, I think is what Dr. Siegel. Or anyway,
Actually, yes, I know the name.
it's called the one I'm reading now is No Drama Discipline, which that is really really good. But I forget the name of the authors.
Oh, that's okay. I can look
Um,
it up.
but
So
totally worth reading. But they're talking about the base function with kids, especially when they automatically
really,
they go to the reptilian brain. Your base brain functions are to get angry, to get impulsive, to do things without thinking. But if you're able to kind of step back and calm things down, especially with a kid, like they're
yes,
angry, you're angry, it just gets out of hand, then you're
yes,
punishing them, and then they resent you, and then
yes,
opposed to worrying about punishing them later, or handling, not punishing them, but the discipline of it later, and connecting with your child in that moment first, and then addressing it when they're calmed down so they absorb it. You know what I
yes,
mean? And it's not the reptile brain, because in the moment they're pissed, you're pissed. And this is in general. And human beings, like, we should
exactly.
just not be slamming out keyboard stuff to each other. You know what I mean? Like, we're
Yes,
yelling at each other online and we don't know what each other is saying because it's binary code and not real
Yes.
human discussion.
Yes. And that is a problem with the internet and with things like Twitter, because things can be going out really quickly and they're the words without the human behind
Right.
it. You don't
They're
have the
inert.
facial expression. But it's interesting what you said about the reptilian brain and trying to calm down at the moment, because I remember a friend of mine who was a nurse, and she studied a lot to do with acupuncture and acupressure and all the pressure points in the body. And she said, you know how when you're upset you do this just automatically? She said there are actually pressure points at the front of the forehead
I do that when I'm
that,
upset all the time. I
yeah,
do
well,
literally this.
basically what you're doing is you're drawing the blood into the front of your brain for that part of your cognition, so that it's not just the terror back here, it's the part of you that's thoughtful here.
Wow.
You are literally pulling blood to that part of your brain. Isn't that fascinating?
Right, because your body struggles when you're in that like fight or flight mode.
Exactly.
It operates completely different. My wife, for example, when she was pregnant with our son Gavin, she was struggling a lot during childbirth. She struggled with anxiety a lot, and she was super anxious during childbirth. And because of it, like her body was in like fight or flight.
Oh, I can
So
imagine.
her, because of her anxiety, no matter what they were to do, like she just constantly had this just insane amount of anxiety. But she was also trying to do completely natural childbirth, completely,
Yes.
she's doing hypnobirthing. When she wanted to go as natural as she
Wow.
could. And she ended up doing that, but it didn't go the way she expected. She got nervous, and there was a lot of anxiety, and her childbirth, I mean, the whole thing, labor was 36 hours. And it was really, really hard. And what we talked about later, me and her, I remember she would discuss this a lot. And I mean, I can't discuss it with her now, but like she made such a good point that like if I was in the wild, right, if I was back a long time ago, saber-toothed tigers or whatever, I don't think that humans and saber-toothed tigers exist at the same time. Maybe they did, I don't remember. But if that was the case, and yeah, I think maybe they did. Going on a tangent.
No, that's all
If
right.
that were to happen in that circumstance, it would be very unlikely you'd be able to give birth. Your body would want to prevent that child from coming out. You try to stay in because your body's natural reaction is to keep the baby in. And of course, it'd be hard to give birth under those circumstances.
Yeah.
So your body's anxious. She was anxious. She's not going to be giving birth because she's so nerved, and your body's got like cortisol, and chemically your body is impacted by the cortisol. Anyway, I guess where I was going is
I've heard about that before.
Yeah.
And actually stories of people who when they're about to give birth, but there's a tragedy that happens and their body stops.
Wow.
And they don't give birth sometimes for a couple of days because the body, because that very thing. Yeah, actually
God, I wish I could tell her about. I mean,
yes.
depending on what you believe in, she knows now. But like,
yes, exactly. But
wow,
she knew that just from her own experience, because I did hear that, and that was one of the most surprising stories I'd ever heard up to that point. I thought, that really happened, and the person, that
and
happened.
It did. She went through that. And I mean, she did childcare. I mean, did the child labor, the childbirth. Childcare. She was in childcare, childbirth for 36 hours, and she did the whole thing, most of it, without any pain medication. They had to force her to take like fentanyl and stuff like that, and she didn't do the epidural, which she regretted. Obviously, she was like, "Had I had the choice, I would have done it after." And she had to push the whole thing, and she was a rock star for the whole thing. But like the fact that when we discussed that like a bunch of times is like, what was the likelihood of that happening? It's interesting to me that like it wasn't something that she necessarily read. It was something that she kind of put together in her head. So it sucks that I can't be like, you were right.
Confirm that and say, well, actually, you're right. Other people have experienced this. That's something that I don't know if anyone's written about that. That would be a really fascinating topic for a doctor to
Seriously.
Talk about
I told her she had a really high IQ. Like she was, I mean, what with that it comes anxiety and stuff, right? It
oh,
always seems
of
like
course.
people who are have a higher IQ or really, really intelligent tend to be the ones that suffer the most with depression, anxiety, and become very reclusive. They keep to themselves and not much for heavy social interactions, known for struggling with substances and stuff. Like, I think that becomes a product of people being highly intelligent, but also the world right now, not exactly socially leaving room
It's a
for
tough
that.
world to live in. It's a
Yeah.
very tough world.
Um, but I mean,
I
the
agree.
use for smart people is very limited in scope, right? Anybody who's very talented in that,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
it's like,
not that's one of the things that's very hard. I mean, if you become an accountant, then your work is valued for that, or if you
right,
become a doctor. But if you're in the arts, or if you're searching for that outlet to use your mind in another way, that might not be those professions that everyone says, oh yes, that will make you money, blah
right.
blah blah. It is very hard. I mean, for writers, for
Mhm.
artists, for musicians, it is very hard. You struggle financially, and you struggle.
Even for the ones that are talented, you know what I mean, that have that
Oh,
talent.
definitely. The number of people who really go and make a great living, there are very few. But for
Yeah,
every person who does, there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens, probably hundreds, who struggle and who have multiple jobs and all these kinds of
yeah,
things.
and they're also really talented.
Very talented, yes. And one of the stories actually that always sticks with me, his last name was Kennedy, who wrote Confederacy of Dunces, that
Oh,
book. I read it years ago. And he won a Pulitzer for it. It's a realistic novel, quite humorous. But he wrote this novel. He was quite a young man, I believe. And he kept trying to get it published and just kept being rejected, rejected, rejected. And he ended up taking his own life. He
oh,
became so despairing. But his mother believed in him, and she kept bringing it around, publisher, publisher, publisher. She finally got someone to read it who actually gave it a chance, said, actually, this is really good. And the book, I don't know how long it was after his death, he won a Pulitzer.
wow. See, and
So
that's how
you think,
much of that just exists and the world never sees it. Masterful artwork,
yeah,
music, all those things that the world never shows because there's not one, the mental health system is fucked beyond, and this is in multiple countries, but also right here in the United States, is just backwards as shit. And a lot of times people with higher intelligence or these creative minds, drummers, writers, mathematicians, all these people, a lot of times they deal with these circumstances where they stay to themselves, they keep to themselves, and because of their inability to socially meet with other people or do things, it never gets out and never, the world never sees it. And I
yeah.
think that
And
there's a
that's a
lot of
tragedy.
it is. I was going to say that the world is robbed of some really amazing art and literature from people that sometimes are just too afraid to put it out because they're afraid
Yes,
of rejection.
yes. And I think I do believe very deeply that everybody has a talent, something special to give to the world. But what's difficult sometimes, and many times, and probably a majority of times, is being able to get that out into the world, to be able to shine your light. I think
Yeah,
so many people, especially so many people, have the barrel put over them before they even begin. And
it's true.
I think it is hard, especially, if you don't grow up in a family where people are pushing you, or people believe in you, or people say, yes, you have something to give.
Yeah,
Or if you've got that glass ceiling over your head where people say, why do you want to do that? You can't do that. You can't be a musician. You
right.
can't be a
That's it.
writer. Here's that ceiling, and it's so hard to get
That
beyond that.
is totally my experience right there. Is that like, and it's not that people said I couldn't do it. It's just that like I didn't have anybody there supporting. Like my mom did, but then my mom died when I was 21, and then like it just, oh, I had a lot of death growing up, and then throughout the years, like parents, anybody that would be in my support system, usually, um, they weren't there or weren't like focused on it or didn't think it was realistic. Like my father, great guy, but didn't think it was very realistic that I could make money being a musician, this and that. but I did have a talent and the ability to do it. After time, I got the ability to do some great things with
And
it,
you're doing it
and
now.
I'm still pushing at it now, and I won't
That's
ever
the most
stop.
important thing. Keep going.
But and I personally, and that's it. That glass ceiling there, that thing is me always this duality with myself of I can't do it, but I know that my entire life, for some reason, and I think this is true with some people, I try not to be deluded with grandeur, but I think at the same time, like some people just know that they have something that other people will appreciate. And even if they beat themselves up about it, that
Yes.
it has meaning to be in the world. You know, you be your own worst critic and all this stuff, but this is the best thing I've been able to produce, and I think people appreciate it.
That's a wonderful thing. And one of the things I was thinking about, with Stephen King, he overcame so many obstacles. His mother always believed in him. She did say, here's a good story, write your own story. Here's a quarter for writing this story. And what
Yeah,
a wonderful gift to give
right.
somebody. So I think that as people who come at this in, any, say, a later part of our lives, to be able to give ourselves that encouragement is the hardest thing in the world. One thing, actually, you were talking about books you'd read about, the theory of how you deal with children and when as a parent.
Yes.
And I actually studied to be a teacher as well. I did my master's degree in English, but I also went back to learn how to be a teacher too. So you do a lot of educational psychology.
Yeah.
And something that I read that really helped me was that many of us, when we're very young, we have we end up getting all our approval from the teacher. We learn that we have to actually get approval from the teacher, but
We're looking for validation from those
exactly,
peers.
rather than doing it
Wow.
for ourselves
Holy shit.
and to say, I'm doing this because it gives me pleasure, it gives me joy, because that gets supplanted by someone else telling us it's okay. And then when we have to depend on them telling us it's okay, we depend on their judgment. Do they say it's good? So there we go.
Oh, yeah. That makes that put a lot of things together, actually. Never, because, and this is why perspective is so important, because you can hear things from somebody else's perspective, and although our perspectives are actually very similar, what you just said linked a lot of things together in my head. It's why, folks, you need to be listening to the people you don't agree with always, and even though they might be ridiculous and be absolutely ridiculous, sometimes it can provide you with some information, and
Yeah, we learn
sometimes it can't.
things.
My friend the other day, and the reason why I say this about, I have a friend that most people wouldn't take information from, but he said some things that were like mind-blowingly wise, actually. So it popped in my head when I was just saying that now, because everybody has a different perspective, and it may be that different perspective will shift the way you're thinking, and I just, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I went on a tangent again there,
No,
but
no, but
that
actually,
one let me
I
think
know
of
what
my
you
friend
mean.
Austin.
Yeah.
um the more time we spend, trying to be in other worlds, I guess. And this goes with video games and stuff too. I do think the more we're gonna have this ability to kind of connect and empathize, because we connect with characters, we connect with these realities. What concerns me um, is obviously the detachment from that empathy from like computers and the
Yeah.
internet and stuff. It's
Yeah.
like those two things are fighting against each other. So I think it's keeping it in balance a little bit, but like it's shifting the other way, and that worries me. And maybe that's a pessimistic way to look at it, but
I think we all wonder about that.
yeah.
We all wonder about that. We all worry about that. What will happen in the future? Uh, will our society survive? Where
Yeah.
are we going? I think there have probably been many times in history where people have asked these questions, but these years are tough ones.
Yeah.
With COVID, this kind of pandemic, I mean, you think back to the terrible flu epidemics of 1918, and that was a world that was exhausted from the First World War.
Right.
And that had a horrific death toll. You look at, they don't have actual numbers,
Yeah.
but you
Man,
think about
I mean, can you imagine going through all of that and not having any, no Candy Crush, no, you know, no Zoom meetings. Like you
Yes.
going through all of that, not having the ability to like do anything, quarantine in your house, like people going crazy and stuff.
Yes.
I, uh, oh man, I had something that I was thinking. Oh, sci-fi and fiction in general. You said earlier about fiction and how it allows us to kind of I don't know, be reflect on ourselves, right? If I
Yes.
understood what you're saying, kind of, but it also allows us to reflect on people and in general. The thing
Yes.
that really is amazing to me is it allows us to reflect on the future, not even reflect on the future, because this is something you can do, but maybe in a way you can look into
Yes.
the
Think
future
about it.
and
Entertain
see.
possibilities.
Yeah, yeah. You're reflecting on the future because you're reflecting on 1984 is a, you know, is past technically, but a a fictional reality that, you know, tangent universe or whatever it may be.
Yes.
Same thing into the future, you know,
Yes. And
foundation
it's
and all
funny
that.
when that was written, it really was the future.
Right.
And then I remember when 1984 came along and people said, "Oh, isn't it great? We're not living in Orwell's 1984." And but then you stop and think of it, but what did he get right?
Right.
What
I'm
did
like,
he say that we're
and how much
actually
of the point did you miss? You know, I mean,
yes,
like
yes,
that's like you missed the point. That's it. Yeah, no, you're right. Like there's a lot he got right, especially now, right
yes,
down to group think and double think and whoo,
yes.
holy
It's
shit.
funny. I've been thinking I need to go back and reread 1984, but I'm
Oh,
actually a
I
little
don't know if
afraid
you'd
to.
want to, man.
I
Oh,
know that's what I was
oh.
thinking. It's
I did
certain
just
books
read it
you can.
again, and
It's wonderful, but ooh, that's hard.
no, it's upsetting. It was really upsetting. It was so much more cold and gray of a novel.
Wow.
Yeah, that's something that anybody out there, you need to wake up from whatever slumber you're in with cognitive dissonance. That's a good book for some people, some Trump publicans to read right now. Yeah, we said probably not get too far into politics there, but you know what? This is relative to fiction, absolutely, because this is a good way to see how badly we can screw up. Didn't happen to us, but there are other worlds than these.
Yes.
Who knows?
Dystopia. I think that you're right. You know, reading dystopian novels gives you a way of looking at our world. And also, what is it that we really need to avoid? Not only what do we want from our world, but what do we not want? What
Right.
do we need to avoid so that we can continue as a society?
Well, yeah.
It's
I
a
mean,
big question.
it asks us like we can manifest. Like what do we choose to manifest as our reality? Like we are the ability. We can. Um. I why am I forgetting this? But I think her name was Elizabeth in Duma Key, the little girl that can. I don't know if that's right or not. She could, you know, the mark a line where the blackness kind of pours in, like that whole creating your own reality and creating, you know, creating things by manifesting it. But what are
Yes.
you going to create? What are you going to manifest in reality? Um,
That is a very big and very important question.
I think that a lot of people are just manifesting negativity right now because they're only seeing the negative things on both sides, which if you know all the stuff that they're finding out recently is somewhat true, about like us manifesting our own reality is almost like a projected sense of reality that we're creating things as we move
Well,
through it.
we do create a reality, don't we? By
Yeah.
how we behave and how we interact with one another.
Mhm.
We are constantly creating the world we live in by how we behave with one another.
You're right. In almost every facet, actually.
Yes.
That's interesting. Because nobody ever really breaks it down to that, you know, down to that very kind of raw aspect of it. That it is really just our own manifestations of what we're creating in these different worlds, like in the new short story there, out of the oh god, I can't think of it right now. If it bleeds,
Oh, yes.
the short story there where like these different worlds and realities were in this guy's head as he's dying, you know. But like he's manifesting his own reality, but manifesting multiple realities, multiple experiences, and you know, and other, you know, how much of life could be this? We don't know anything
Actually,
about
you know,
our
I'm catching up
consciousness.
on If It Bleeds Now. So this is so interesting. It's so timely you're talking about this because I
Good way
just
to
pulled
tie
that
it
out
in.
yesterday.
That's awesome. I was really kind of wondering in the ways, you know, the tie-in there,
Yeah.
obviously. It's tough because it's a hard thing to interpret. That was an interesting story to break down. But obvious connections to the Dark Tower. And I was just, it's very, I'd be interested to see
Yes, we
some.
should come back and discuss this again once I do.
Absolutely,
But
for
also because
sure.
Bob Gibney's in that as well, and I'm
Right.
not
Oh
always.
yeah, for in If It Bleeds
Yeah,
Itself. Yeah. I mean, I was talking the short story with a guy who's dying on life support there, but
right.
both in that short story collection. Holly Gibney, oh my God, we didn't get to talk about that either, but we will another time. I am sure
Yes.
we can make this a second part episode because this has been really fantastic
Yeah,
and
it's
I
been
could nerd
really
out
enjoyable. Yeah.
all day. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for inviting me, and talking books is a great thing to do.
This
And
has been fantastic. I could ask you another hour and a half of questions. You have no idea. Thank you so much for coming on. And
thank you for having me. And enjoy the rest of your day. It's different. I'm going to go eat my dinner because I'm on a different time
all
than
right,
you
it's a
are.
completely different
So
time zone.
luckily, my stomach didn't start to rumble, so we're okay. I didn't make any embarrassing tummy rumbles.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you coming on and your time. It's been great. And to listeners out there, thank you so much for listening to Abstract Transmissions. The thing we were highlighting on, which I think is really great, is that the manifesting thing. We really are kind of manifesting a reality. If everything is a negative connotation to it, your life, your day is going to be negative. So try to just, you know, it doesn't have to be The Secret, you know, that book, but you can literally manifest your reality just by happiness.
Yes.
So on that note, be nice to each other. And as always, abstract here, abstract there.
Abstract Transmissions.